the dip, one of the most fundamental bodyweight exercises. An old school classic you will find in the training routines of both beginners and advanced practitioners. Calisthenics athletes, gymnasts, powerlifters, even bodybuilders, they all use it in one form or another. For calisthenics athletes and gymnasts, it's the perfect complementary exercise for push skills or even part of their warm-up routine. For powerlifters, it often serves as a valuable accessory, helping to build upper body strength, especially for the bench press. And for bodybuilders, it can serve as a pure chest isolation movement, a classic way to build size and definition. And that says a lot, not just about how accessible, popular and effective this exercise is, but also about its progression. You can make it easier by reducing your body weight, or harder by adding external load. And that's where things start to get interesting, because once there is weight involved, there is always that one question: who will lift the most? Streetlifting, formerly known as weighted calisthenics, is a relatively new discipline that's rapidly gaining popularity around the world. The main focus is on the weighted pull-up and weighted dip, with some competitions also including the weighted muscle-up or weighted squat. In competition, athletes are judged on their performance in these main lifts, and just like in powerlifting, the goal is simple: lift as much weight as possible. Streetlifting events are usually divided into two categories: classic and multi-lift. In the classic format, the goal is to achieve your maximum single lift, basically your 1 rep max. In the multi-lift, the focus shifts to performing as many reps as possible with a given weight. In many ways, streetlifting is closer to powerlifting than to gymnastic strength training. Both sports revolve around testing the heaviest possible successful repetition. Even the competition format is similar: 3 attempts per movement with your best lift counting toward the final score. Streetlifting also uses its own scoring formulas, just like powerlifting, taking into account factors like body weight, age and sex to balance results between athletes. Both sports demand the same things: raw strength, precise technique and total mental focus under pressure. At the end of the day, whether it's a barbell or your own body weight with plates hanging from a belt, the mission is the same: chase personal bests, break records and push the limits of human strength. Equipment plays a crucial role for every streetlifter, and it's the next element I want to focus on in this part. To guide this section, I'll refer to Streetlifter's Bible by Artem Shirokov, a true goldmine of knowledge when it comes to equipment setup and the techniques used by some of the world's top streetlifters. Let's start with what kind of equipment elite athletes actually use. First and foremost, instead of the traditional dip belt with a steel chain, many top streetlifters recommend using a daisy chain. In some cases, you will even see athletes using a custom cable. The main reason behind this choice is weight. Every extra gram matters at the elite level. A lighter setup means the additional load doesn't interfere with the lift, especially when record attempts come down to differences of just 1 kilogram. Another key advantage of using a daisy chain is the improved positioning and control. Because of its length, the weight can hang between the feet, allowing the athlete to maintain a straighter posture and minimizing any forward or backward swing during the dip. And finally, it often comes down to convenience. Attaching weights with a daisy chain is noticeably faster and easier, especially when stacking multiple plates. It slides cleanly through plate holes, unlike a steel chain, which often gets stuck and can be harder to adjust. Next, we have wrist and elbow wraps, another common part of a streetlifter setup. This combination is most often seen in the dip, where the main purpose is to stabilize the joints, especially during heavy, record-level attempts where tightness and joint integrity become crucial. Additionally, when it comes to heavy squats, athletes, similar to powerlifters, often rely on knee wraps and a lifting belt, which increases intra-abdominal pressure and helps stabilize the lumbar spine. The last piece of equipment worth mentioning is the dip bars themselves. Streetlifters often train on specialized dip stations, typically with thicker handles, which provide better grip stability and reduce wrist strain. They are also set up relatively narrow, usually around shoulder width, to optimize pressing mechanics and control. And that wraps up the equipment section, a combination of small but crucial details that make a big difference at the highest level of streetlifting. The weighted dip is one of the main lifts in streetlifting. It usually comes third in competition after the muscle-up and the pull-up. Each athlete has 3 attempts with one clear goal: to complete a clean repetition with the heaviest possible weight. But the word complete here really matters, because for a lift to count, it has to meet all the official technical standards. During every attempt, there are 3 judges on the stage: one head judge who gives the commands, and 2 side judges who assist and confirm the movement. Their decisions are final. When the head judge calls "platform ready," the athlete takes position on the box and moves into the starting position, arms fully extended, hips almost straight, and a stable grip on the bars. After the command, the attempt begins. The athlete lowers down until the highest point of the rear shoulder drops below the highest point of the elbow. At the same time, the lowest point of the dip belt must reach at least the level of the top of the bars. After reaching the required depth, the athlete presses back up, fully extending the elbows to return to the starting position. Once locked out, they wait for the final command, which signals the end of the attempt. After that, the athlete steps back onto the box, the weight is removed, and the lift is officially complete. Per Fernandez. The Spanish athlete currently holds an impressive total in the under 87 kilos category, reaching a combined 584.25 kilograms.
But my mind, of going there every day, training as hard as I could, my mentality of always trying to be better and always trying to do my best and be better than I was 1 month ago. This makes me improve a lot. I try to take the positive side of this and always try to improve and be better.
That's how Per himself describes his approach to training, and it really shows. Before we break down his dip technique, it's worth mentioning how impressive his overall preparation is. Every session starts with a detailed warm-up, focusing on each key joint and muscle involved in the movement. He approaches every lift with full concentration and intent, always motivated to improve rep by rep. Now let's focus on his dip. As expected, it perfectly meets all streetlifting standards. The starting and finishing positions are identical, showing a consistent and controlled movement path. His torso remains slightly leaned forward, creating an efficient angle for the chest and triceps to engage, while his legs stay slightly bent, squeezing the weight plates together for stability. During the eccentric phase, he lowers himself until the rear deltoid drop just below the top of the elbow, and at the same moment, the lowest point of the dip belt reaches exactly the level of the dip bars. It's a clean, textbook execution. The next athlete, and also a record holder, is Matthew Zlat from Russia. Competing in the under 101 kilo category, he holds a remarkable total of 587.5 kilograms.
I never really had a secret. I kept improvement and I got improvement. When you have that fiery temper in yourself and you also apply old brain, old analysis, with this approach you get the best results. Maybe that's the kind of secret.
What stands out most about Matthew isn't just his strength, but the emotion and intensity he brings into every lift. His preparation is meticulous, from his detailed warm-up routine to the amount of accessory and side work he includes in his training. Now, let's take a look at his dip technique. Similar to Per, his starting and finishing positions are identical, showing excellent control and precision throughout the movement. His torso leans slightly forward, setting up strong activation in the chest and triceps. One thing that is especially interesting to observe is the head movement. It naturally follows the eccentric phase, moving slightly downward as he descends, and then aligns again with the torso during the upward phase. During the eccentric phase, he lowers himself under the rear deltoid drop just below the elbow line, while the lowest point of the dip belt reaches the level of the dip bars, a movement that perfectly meets the streetlifting standards. Both Per Fernandez and Matthew Zlat represent the very best of what streetlifting has to offer. Despite their different backgrounds and bodyweight categories, both athletes demonstrate a nearly identical approach to the dip: perfect control, consistent movement paths, and execution that fully meets streetlifting standards. Like in any sport, debate and controversy are inevitable, and streetlifting is no exception, especially when it comes to the weighted dip, the movement we've been focusing on throughout this video. The main point of discussion, the technique used by some of the top athletes in the world. Critics often claim that this isn't a real dip, arguing that the form is designed to reduce range of motion and simply lift more weight. These kind of comments frequently appear under training clips shared by elite streetlifters, videos where they showcase their heavy dip sessions. A similar debate also happens in the weighted pull-up. Because these techniques are rarely seen by the average viewer, they often create confusion and controversy, especially when performed with massive amounts of added weight. Take this example. In a single clip, two lifters perform the dips using different techniques. One goes deeper, while the other uses a range of motion that more closely resembles competition standards. Many viewers instantly claim that the second athlete is doing it wrong. At the end of the day, in official streetlifting competitions, there is no confusion. Every rep is judged based on clear, established rules, and 3 referees decide whether an attempt counts or not. But on social media, it's a different story. There will always be people ready to comment, to argue whether a lift was clean or not counted. And maybe that's just part of what keeps the sport alive and evolving. When we look at the form of the top streetlifters lifting massive weights in competition, it becomes clear that their form differs significantly from the casual gym-style dip. Take a look at these 2 examples. In both attempts, I lower myself to roughly a 90-degree angle at the elbows, and technically both could be called a weighted dips. However, the second version looks much closer to what we see from elite streetlifters. Let's analyze the difference. In the first attempt, the hips drop lower, and the angle between the arm and torso is much wider, which means a greater stretch through the chest and the shoulders. In the second version, the hips stay higher, and the chest doesn't stretch as much at the bottom of the movement. So why does the second variation, the competition style dip, offer more potential for lifting heavier loads? To begin, we need to ask ourselves 3 main questions. First, how do changes in technique influence torque and mechanical efficiency? Second, does modifying the technique actually reduce the range of motion? And finally, how important are load stability and force transfer? And why does this style allow the weight to stay more controlled throughout the entire movement? Before we go any further, let's briefly define what torque actually is. In biomechanics, torque is a rotational force produced by muscles that causes a limb to rotate around the joint. In the dip, there is a complex interaction of joint torques across 3 main joints: the shoulder, the elbow, and the wrist. For the purpose of this analysis, we'll set the elbow and the wrist aside. In both techniques, their mechanics remain largely the same and don't significantly change the outcome. So instead, we'll focus on the shoulder joint and more specifically shoulder flexion during the dip. In competition-style dips, elite streetlifters slightly adjust their posture by keeping the upper back more closed and the humerus closer to the torso. Now, it's important to be precise here. It would be an oversimplification to say that this technique is purely stronger because of the length-tension relationship alone, especially since muscles are often capable of producing high force in stretched positions as well. What's more likely is a combination of factors. This posture may place the pectoralis major and anterior deltoid in a length range where force production is more consistent or more effective, neural activation is easier to achieve. In other words, it's not just about muscle length, it's about how reliably force can be generated and transferred in this position. By keeping the shoulder closer to this mechanically favorable zone, athletes avoid positions where force output becomes unpredictable or where joint stress increases disproportionately. You could say that elite streetlifters are subtly turning the dip into a more horizontally oriented push, not to cheat the movement, but to remain within the strongest and most controllable shoulder mechanics throughout the lift. This allows them to generate high torque where it matters most, while still fully meeting streetlifting competition standards. The next element worth examining is the range of motion. Does competition form reduce it, and more importantly, is that a specific factor that makes that form easier? And here we need to be very clear. In resistance training, range of motion is defined typically by joint angles and not by how far the body travels through space. So if the elbow still reaches roughly 90 degrees at the bottom, then for the elbow joint the range of motion is essentially the same. Where differences do appear is at the shoulder. By leaning the torso forward and keeping the humerus closer to the body, the shoulder moves through a smaller range of angular positions, even though the lift is still completed to competition depth. However, a smaller shoulder range of motion does not automatically mean the movement requires less torque. You're still resisting the same external load, and the torque demands at the joint are the same. What changes is the shoulder angle at which the body handles these demands. A useful way to think about this is not that the dip becomes easier, but we are simply stronger while performing it. By maintaining a consistent shoulder angle and avoiding excessive opening at the bottom, the athlete keeps the humerus close to the torso for most of the lift, which for many lifters represents their strongest and most controllable position. Even though the joint angle may appear similar frame to frame, the body is still producing torque throughout the movement. The key idea here isn't reduced effort, it's strategic positioning. So to put it simply, the competition-style dip allows athletes to complete the entire repetition while spending more time in positions where they are mechanically strongest and less time in vulnerable or inefficient ranges. Just as importantly, for many athletes, the more open version of the dip with deeper shoulder extension becomes increasingly uncomfortable or even painful under extreme loads. The competition-style posture often feels more natural, more stable, and less stressful on the shoulders when pushing maximal weights, and that alone can make a massive difference in long-term progress. The final factor is load stability and force transfer. The competition-style dip stands out for its exceptional control throughout the entire movement. By actively squeezing the weight between the legs, athletes prevent the load from swinging forward or backward. This matters more than it might seem. A swinging load constantly shifts the center of mass, forcing the athletes to make rapid and efficient corrections during the lift. By keeping the weight stable and directly under the body, force can be transferred more efficiently throughout the arms, shoulders, and torso without energy being lost to unnecessary movement. The result is a more predictable, repeatable, and mechanically efficient rep. At the highest level, that extra stability can be the difference between a successful lift and a missed attempt. In summary, the competition-style technique offers greater potential for lifting heavier loads. Not because it eliminates effort, but because it allows athletes to express strength more efficiently, more safely, and more consistently. That said, mastering this technique to the point where it fully meets competition standards is far from easy. It requires precision and tremendous strength. As someone who has been training mainly calisthenics for over 6 years, I truly believe that streetlifting, especially through movements like the weighted dip and weighted pull-up, is incredibly valuable in many ways. Most importantly, it allows us to progress in the fundamental bodyweight exercises without having to change their natural technique. It helps build transferable strength while staying true to the essence of calisthenics. Weighted variations also serve as a great accessory exercises for advanced skills. For example, weighted pull-ups can directly support front lever strength, while weighted dips for the planche. And beyond that, if someone simply enjoys training heavy dips instead of traditional bench presses or dumbbell work, streetlifting is a perfect alternative. I also find the competitions themselves truly inspiring, the atmosphere, the focus, the energy of the athletes. And for anyone who trains calisthenics, streetlifting feels much closer to home than something like powerlifting. It bridges the gap between bodyweight strength and pure lifting, and it expands the world of competitive calisthenics, which, in my opinion, is a beautiful thing to see.